When I lost my job, my wife laughed and told her friends, he'll come crawling back. Instead, I invested in my passion. 5 years later, I was on Forbes cover. Today, she sat across from me in a job interview. You look familiar, I said, flipping through her resume. Tell me, why did you leave your last job? I still remember the way she laughed, the way her lips curled in amusement, her head tilting back as she whispered to her friends, he'll come crawling back. She didn't even wait for me to leave the house before she called him over. The moment I lost my job, it was like the last thread holding our marriage together snapped. I stood in the hallway, gripping the doorknob, listening as she poured another glass of wine and maybe the punchline of her evening entertainment. I knew this would happen. He's too safe, too careful. No risk, no reward, right? She said, giggling. He'll run out of money soon enough, and then he'll beg me to take him back. I wish I could say I stormed in and confronted her, that I had some clever, cutting remark to throw back in her face. But I didn't. I just stood there, my heartbeat hammering in my ears. Then I walked out, and I never looked back. The first year was brutal. I was jobless, broke and alone. Friends stopped answering my calls. My family, well, they had warned me about her, hadn't they? And they didn't hesitate to remind me. But I wasn't interested in sympathy. I was interested in proving her wrong. I took what little I had left and invested it. Not just money, but time, sweat, and every ounce of desperation that lived inside me. My passion? Tech startups. Innovation. I had ideas, and now I had the fire to chase them. The late nights. The countless rejections. The near bankruptcy. I lived through all of it. And then success. It didn't happen overnight, but when it did, it hit like a tidal wave. One investment turned into two into 10. Before I knew it, my company was being talked about in circles I once only dreamed of stepping into. 5 years later, I was standing in front of a photographer, adjusting my suit, while someone adjusted the lighting. Forbes cover shot in 3 to click. That moment I won. Not against her. Against the version of myself she thought I was. Mr. Hayes, your next interviewee is here, my assistant Vanessa said, stepping into my office. I barely looked up from the resume in my hands. Another applicant, another hopeful, trying to land a job in my company. I had done at least a dozen interviews this week alone. Send them in, I said, flipping to the next page. Then I saw the name. My fingers froze. No, it couldn't be. The door opened, and I looked up. She stepped in, her posture straight, her chin lifted just slightly, but I saw it. The hesitation. The flicker of something behind her carefully constructed mask. Recognition. And maybe regret? She looked different. Not in the way time changes a person, but in the way life does. The expensive dresses, the perfectly styled hair, the confidence that used to ooze from every step she took, gone. She wore a simple blouse, slacks, a portfolio clutched in her manicured fingers. I leaned back in my chair, studying her the way she once studied me. You look familiar, I said, tapping the resume against my desk. Tell me, why did you leave your last job? Her lips parted, but no words came out. For the first time since I had known her, she had nothing to say. For the first time since I had known her, she had nothing to say. I let the silence stretch. Let her sit in it, feel it, the same way I had felt that laughter 5 years ago. She swallowed hard, forcing a tight smile. It's good to see you, Adam. I didn't return the sentiment. Instead, I leaned forward, folding my hands over her resume. Tell me, Emily, why did you leave your last job? Her fingers tightened around the portfolio in her lap. My company downsized, she said finally, carefully picking her words. I was let go. I almost laughed. How poetic. The woman who once mocked my downfall now sat before me, the roles reversed. But I wasn't the same desperate man she had left behind. And she knew it. Downsized, I echoed, running a thumb along the edge of the paper. That's tough. She nodded, glancing away for just a moment. Long enough for me to see the crack in her composure. I decided to press a little harder. You were in marketing, right? Senior executive. Yes. She forced another smile. But I have experience in multiple fields. I'm adaptable. Adaptable. The word rolled in my mind, heavy with irony. Because 5 years ago, she had been anything but. When I lost my job, she hadn't adapted. She had abandoned. I flipped through her resume, barely scanning it. And you're applying for. I trailed off, letting her finish for me. She hesitated. A managerial role. Something stable. Stable. I mused, tapping the paper against the desk. You always did like stability. A shadow crossed her face. She understood exactly what I meant. The power shift was undeniable, and she hated it. Emily had always been in control of conversations, of people, of me. But now, she was a job applicant, sitting across from a man she never expected to see again. At least, not like this. She inhaled sharply, straightening her shoulders. Look, Adam, I know this must be strange, but I wouldn't have come here if I wasn't serious about this opportunity. And I'm supposed to believe you'd work for me. If it means having a steady income, yes. There it was. Honesty, stripped of pride. She needed this job, and that's what made me pause. Because Emily wasn't the kind of person who asked for help, not unless she had something to gain. I studied her, the way she held herself, the way she measured every response. There was something beneath the surface. A game, a plan. She had underestimated me once. That wouldn't happen again. You were right, you know? I said suddenly, leaning back. She frowned. About what? About me. About my playing it safe. No risk, no reward, right? I smirked. Turns out, I just needed the right motivation. Her face paled slightly, but she covered it well. I'm glad you found success, Adam. Truly. Lies. She didn't expect this. Didn't expect me to be sitting in this chair, in this office, holding the power she once had over me. I could see it in her eyes, the disbelief, the discomfort, the realization that, despite all her predictions, I hadn't come crawling back. I had risen, and now she was the one crawling. I tossed a resume onto the desk. I'll think about it. Her lips parted slightly, caught off guard. That's it. I shrugged. I have other candidates to consider. I'll be in touch. A test. To see if she would break character. To see if desperation would chip away at her pride. For a second, she looked like she wanted to argue. But then, she nodded. Of course. I appreciate your time. She stood, smoothing out invisible wrinkles in her blouse. But before she could turn, I spoke again. Oh, and Emily? She paused. Be careful who you laugh at on the way up. I met her gaze, my voice calm, measured. You never know who you'll meet on the way down. Her face didn't change, but her fingers tightened around her portfolio before she finally walked out the door. I exhaled slowly. I should have felt triumphant. Should have felt satisfied watching her walk away, knowing the scales had finally tipped in my favor. But something about this felt unfinished. A loose thread. And if there's one thing I've learned in business, it's that loose threads always lead somewhere. I watched the door long after she was gone. Something didn't sit right. The way she carried herself, the carefully measured words, the forced smile, it was all too neat. Emily was many things, but desperate? No, she wasn't the kind of person who accepted failure, let alone beg for a job. Which meant one thing. She was playing a game. The question was, what did she really want? Vanessa, I called out. My assistant appeared in the doorway. Yes, Mr. Hayes. Run a background check on Emily Carter, I said, tapping a pen against my desk. I want to know everything. Where she's worked, who she's been in contact with, any financial troubles, especially those. Vanessa arched an eyebrow. You think something's off? I know something's off. She nodded, jotting down a note. I'll have a report by the end of the day. I leaned back in my chair as she left, exhaling slowly. Emily wanted something from me, and I intended to find out exactly what. A sudden invitation, the background check, came in faster than expected. She wasn't lying about the downsizing, Vanessa said, setting a folder on my desk. Her company took a hit after a bad merger. She was let go 6 months ago. 6 months. That was a long time to be unemployed, especially for someone as ambitious as Emily. But here's where it gets interesting, Vanessa continued. She recently drained her savings, sold her condo, and she hesitated, glancing at me. She's in significant debt. I tapped my fingers against the desk. So that was it. She wasn't just looking for a job. She was looking for a lifeline. That's not all, Vanessa added. She was married. I froze. Was. Vanessa nodded. Divorced last year. No kids. But her ex-husband. She slid a separate paper toward me. His name's Richard Langley. Ring any bells? It did. Richard Langley was a major investor. One with a questionable reputation. Ruthless. Cutthroat. The kind of man who didn't just lose money. He made sure someone else paid for it. A strange feeling settled in my chest. Emily had been married to him, and now she was broke, unemployed, and sitting in my office, asking for a job? No, this wasn't a coincidence. The setup, as if on cue, my phone buzzed. An unknown number. I answered. Hayes. A pause. Then Adam. Emily. I leaned back, gripping the phone a little tighter. That was fast. I wanted to thank you for seeing me today. Her voice was smooth, calculated. I know it must have been unexpected. You could say that. She exhaled softly. I was wondering, would you be open to meeting for dinner? To talk things through. Properly. There it was. The move. A setup, plain as day. I glanced at the background report, still open on my desk. Richard Langley. Debt. Desperation. She wasn't just looking for a job. She was looking for something else. And I intended to find out exactly what. I smiled, even though she couldn't see it. Dinner? Sure, Emily. Let's talk. The restaurant was upscale. Dim lighting, soft music, and an air of exclusivity. Emily had chosen it. Of course she had. I arrived 5 minutes early, giving me time to scan a room. Old habits. Trust had been burned out of me a long time ago, and something about this meeting screamed setup. She walked in right on time. Graceful. Composed. Wearing a navy blue dress that looked expensive, but not too expensive, just enough to suggest she was doing fine. A carefully curated illusion. I stood as she approached. Emily. Adam. She smiled, but her eyes were studying me the same way I was studying her. calculating, measuring. We sat. A waiter appeared almost instantly, pouring us wine. She picked red. I picked water. Someone needed to stay sharp. Thank you for coming, she said, setting her glass down. You didn't really give me a choice, I said, smirking. She laughed softly. Still quick with the sarcasm, I see. And you're still avoiding the real conversation, I shot back. Her smile didn't falter, but I saw the flicker in her eyes. I was getting to her. All right, she said, leaning forward. Let's be honest with each other. No games. I raised an eyebrow. No games? With you. I chuckled. That'd be a first. She exhaled, tilting her head slightly. I need this job, Adam. I sipped my water. I don't doubt that. You looked into me. It wasn't a question. I met her gaze without hesitation. Of course I did. She nodded, as if she expected that. Then you know about Richard. Your ex-husband? Yeah, I know about him. I leaned back. Ruthless investor. Likes control. Doesn't take losses well. Which makes me wonder, how much does he have to do with why you're really here? For the first time, Emily hesitated. Bullseye. She took a slow breath. After the divorce, I took a settlement. A generous one. I smirked. Didn't seem to last long. A flash of irritation crossed her face. Because Richard made sure of that. Now we were getting somewhere. I stayed silent, letting her talk. He found ways to cut me off. Legal loopholes. Assets frozen. Deals sabotaged. He made sure I had nothing left. She clenched her jaw. And now he wants me to pay him back for his losses. I frowned. Losses? From what? She hesitated. I leaned in. Emily. She swallowed. A deal. A bad one. One I convinced him to make. He blames me for it. Now the pieces were falling into place. Richard had lost money because of Emily. And a man like him? He wouldn't just walk away from that. He's THR-teaming you, I said. She didn't confirm it. But she didn't deny it, either. I exhaled. And let me guess, you think if I give you a job, I'll have leverage, she cut in. A stable income. Enough to make him back off. A slow smirk spread across my face. So that's why you came to me. Emily lifted her chin slightly. You owe me nothing, Adam. I know that. But I also know you're not the kind of man who ignores something like this. She wasn't wrong. I hated Richard Langley. Always had. The man was a vulture, feeding on the weak, twisting the system to benefit himself. And Emily? Well, she may have betrayed me once. But if she was telling the truth, she was about to be devoured by something far worse. I studied her carefully. She was playing the only card she had left me, banking on the idea that despite everything, I wouldn't let her drown. And the worst part? She wasn't entirely wrong. I sighed, setting my glass down. I'll think about it. Her shoulders tensed slightly. That's all. That's all. She exhaled, nodding slowly. All right, I'll wait for your call. She stood, smoothing out her dress. But before she left, she placed a single business card on the table. It wasn't hers. It was Richard Langley's. I picked it up, running my thumb over the embossed name. A challenge. An invitation. Or maybe a warning. As she walked away, I sat back in my chair, flipping the card between my fingers. I should have let her go. Should have walked away. But something told me this was only the beginning. And I had never been one to back down from a fight. The business card sat on my desk for 3 days. 3 days of debating whether I should burn it, ignore it, or do the one thing I knew would drag me into something I couldn't walk away from. I should have walked away. Should have let Emily handle her own mess. But something about this didn't sit right. Richard Langley wasn't the kind of man who just wanted his money back. No, men like him wanted control, power, submission. Emily wasn't asking for a job. She was asking for a shield. And if she was desperate enough to come to me for help, that meant Richard was more dangerous than she was letting on. So I made the call. The line rang twice before a smooth, practiced voice answered. Adam Hayes. I was wondering when you'd reach out. I leaned back in my chair, gripping the phone a little tighter. Figure we should talk. A chuckle. Talk? Or negotiate? That depends on what you want from Emily. A pause. Then, with chilling amusement, he said, why don't we discuss it over dinner? Deja vu. Only this time, I wasn't walking into a conversation. I was walking into a trap. The restaurant was darker than Emily's choice. More exclusive. The kind of place where deals were made in hushed tones and signed in blood. Richard sat in the private lounge, legs crossed, a whiskey glass in hand. He looked exactly like I remembered, sharp suit, graying hair, the kind of smile that belonged to a man who enjoyed watching others squirm. Adam. He gestured to the seat across from him. Join me. I sat. He studied me for a moment, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. You always were an interesting one. Back when you were married to Emily, I figured you for a nobody. A safe bet. A man who wouldn't last. He smirked. And yet, here you are, the one who made it. I didn't take the bait. Why don't we skip the small talk? What do you want from Emily? His smile didn't waver. What she owes me. You have more money than you could spend in 10 lifetimes, I said, my voice flat. So what's this really about? Richard set his glass down, leaning forward. Control, Adam. It's always about control. I already knew that, but I needed him to say it. He smirked, sensing my thoughts. Emily convinced me to invest in a venture that went under. She made promises, guarantees, and when things went south, she ran. And now you want revenge. Call it balance. He exhaled, stretching his fingers along the table. She cost me a great deal, and I don't take kindly to debts unpaid. But now I see a more interesting option. I clenched my jaw, and that is. He smirked. You. I stiffened. Richard sat back, amused. You think I don't see the bigger picture? Emily ran to you because she thinks you're powerful enough to keep her safe, which means you have something I want more than her money. I stared at him, my pulse slow and steady. And what's that? He leaned in, his voice low. Leverage. There it was. The real game. He didn't just want Emily broken. He wanted me in his pocket. My company. My influence. My power. And he was using her as the bait. I exhaled slowly, keeping my expression unreadable. Let's say I don't bite. What happens then? Richard smiled, slow and dangerous. Then she suffers. And eventually, so will you. I stared at him, every muscle in my body coiled. I'd dealt with men like him before. Bullies in expensive suits who believed they could buy and break anyone. But Richard was different, because this wasn't just about business. This was personal. He lifted his glass. I'll give you time to think it over. But don't take too long. Emily's running out of it. I stood. If you touch her, he chuckled, waving a hand. Please. No otra vez, Adam. We're both smarter than that. I didn't respond. I just turned and walked out, my mind already racing. Emily had dragged me into this. But now it was my fight. And Richard Langley had just made the worst mistake of his life. Richard Langley always thought he was untouchable. A man above consequences, above failure. He forgot one thing. I don't play safe anymore. I spent the next week unraveling his empire the same way he tried to unravel mine. See, Richard didn't just lose money in that failed investment. He covered his losses with shady deals. Deals that, with the right leverage, unraveled like a loose thread in a $1,000 suit. By the time I was done, his business was in flames. Regulators came knocking. Investors pulled out. The man who once controlled everything, reduced to a name in the headlines. Billionaire Richard Langley under federal investigation for fraud. Poetic justice. As for Emily, she got her freedom, but not without a cost. I offered her a job, not out of pity, not out of nostalgia, but because despite everything, she had value. She was smart, strategic, and for the first time, she had nothing left to manipulate. She took it, but she knew the unspoken truth. This wasn't forgiveness. This was survival. One afternoon, she knocked on my office door. I barely glanced up. Yes. She hesitated. Why did you help me? I set my pen down, finally meeting her gaze. Because I wanted to. I let the words settle. Not because I owed you. Her eyes flickered. Understanding, maybe regret. But she didn't apologize. Emily Carter never apologized. And that's how I knew she'd be fine. Months passed. My company grew. My name carried more weight than ever. One night, I caught my reflection in my office window, the city lights behind me, my suit crisp, my posture unshaken. 5 years ago, I was a man on the verge of collapse. Now, I was the one people feared, respected, the one holding the power. Funny how life works. I exhaled, picking up the Forbes magazine on my desk, the one with my face on the cover. Success comes with a price, the headline read. And for the first time, I truly understood what that meant. I won, but winning doesn't come without scars. And some betrayals, no matter how much time passes, never really fade.